Welcome everyone to another CTC software webinar. My name is Sean Zerbis, Technical Evangelist at CTC, and today we're going to go through a comprehensive introduction on Spreadsheet Link. Now many of you probably read the description already, but we're just going to kind of recover this real quick. Revit is a fantastic building information modeling tool. It's great for that. It's great at retaining information, managing some of the information, but it's not always so great at manipulating all that data. In some cases, yes. In other cases, not so much. In this webinar, I'm going to kind of show you how Spreadsheet Link can take data from Revit based on Revit elements out to a spreadsheet. You can do whatever you want to it pretty much within reason, and then return that back into Revit so that you can leverage that data. There's a really great set of workflows that you can use for this. I'll show you a couple of examples today, but really, sky's the limit, as they say. You can do quite a lot with this. So real quick, what are some of the issues? And I'm going to demonstrate some of these live in Revit in just a moment. Schedules are a fantastic way they can edit single values at a time, and of course they update everywhere in the model. That's great. Schedules are just another view of your data in Revit. Problem is, you can't take large amounts of data and copy paste that all over the place in a schedule like you can in Excel. You can't do autofills. There's a lot of things like that you can't do. Schedule keys are a great solution for some things, but they're not always the most convenient for everything. And so there's a lot of cases where maybe schedule keys aren't the right answer, and you want to be able to still do large data edits. Revit parameters also have another limitation in that they don't always accept formula associations, especially with system families. You can do some formulaic work in system families using global parameters. You can do some work in a calculated value in a schedule, but that's not really BIM per se. That's just fake calculations. And so there's some issues there. And you also can't take data from one category of an object and make it talk to another one. Big example for this one is doors that are placed into a wall. I can't tell that door natively in Revit to read the wall's fire rating. And maybe I wanted to. Maybe I wanted to talk to the wall and ask it some questions and get some data back and do something with that information. But in Revit, as smart as a program as it is, it really can't let you do all of that natively in the software. So we're going to take a look today at how Spreadsheet Link can be the solution to a lot of this. You get a powerful Excel-like functionality natively in the interface, full functionality of Excel by saving it out to Excel. You can also use other spreadsheet editing tools if you'd like. I happen to use Excel. It's very popular. Many of us have it, but you can use things like Google Sheets if you wanted to. Formulas can be written for any editable parameter. And so you can do a lot of powerful things with Excel using any parameter's value. And also, any category can really be made to relate to any other category. If you can have some kind of information between the two that can talk, you can make them relate. And there's some really powerful things you can do on the MEP front with this as well, where I can take objects in one model and make them talk to objects in another model. I can actually do cross-model coordination using this tool. So some great stuff here. What we're going to cover today is how do you get access to Spreadsheet Link from the interface once you've installed it. We're going to take a look at the interface of Spreadsheet Link. We're going to do some basic and some detailed data manipulation. And then we're also going to kind of take you through a little bit of defining some saved settings for some really powerful repeatable workflows. We're going to go through a lot of stuff today. If you want to know more, as always, we've got pre-recorded webinars and presentations up on the YouTube channel. There's a whole playlist already dedicated to Spreadsheet Link, and you can start kind of taking a look at other workflows in very detailed ways. That's how we set those up on the YouTube channel. And also, as per usual, if you have questions while I'm going through anything today, I encourage you to throw them in the questions window. It's one of the benefits of being at a live webinar with CTC. If you ask questions, I'm going to try to answer them when you ask them. So with that, let's jump in live and see how this works inside of Revit. Enough PowerPoint. I'm not big on death by PowerPoint. So let's get access to Spreadsheet Link first. On the ribbon up here at the top, I already happen to be there, but if you have installed any of our tools, you should have a CTC software tab. If you have an older installation, you might see Revit Express Tools as the tab name. But CTC software is the current tab. And on the CTC software tab, you should find a tool set here called the BIM project suite. I'm pulling that group off just so we can isolate this for a minute. It's all of the tools in green. Spreadsheet Link is one of the licensed tools on the project suite. It's a dark green button there. If you have large icons, you'll still see it as one of the buttons out there being a licensed tool. Spreadsheet Link, when you open it up, is going to have two portions to the main interface. There's the main settings window here, and there's the spreadsheet window that usually shows up in the background. And I use both of them interchangeably. I go back and forth. It's kind of important because I'm going to change some settings here from the main settings window, and I'm going to make data edits back in the main spreadsheet window. In the main Spreadsheet Link settings window, you kind of have to start here before anything's really going to function and do much. In this main Spreadsheet Link settings window, you have the ability by default right away to see categories of objects. This is very much the same as working with building a brand new schedule in Revit. You choose a category, you then get access to you'll see the actual categories or schedules maybe that you've chosen. You can then choose additional parameters or whatever available parameters you need to be in that selected columns list. And as you choose these parameters, they automatically show up inside the Spreadsheet Link background window over here as well. Okay. At the bottom left corner, this is a very important portion of Spreadsheet Link. Bottom left corner right here, you can choose between 3 different types of data sources. Categories is what I have up here right now. That's the default. This shows me all of the elements in Revit that I can pull out as a Revit schedule or as data points, and it'll pull the instances of these into the Spreadsheet Link window with all their properties. All instance values and type values will be editable from there. There's a types option. Those of you who are BIM managers, this is a great way to go through and do some basic type manipulation, including things like renaming types. To follow some kind of naming convention. You can use this to help automate that process. So this will give you just the types, no instance properties, just type definitions. And then finally down here at the very bottom, one of the most popular things to use is schedules. Schedules will actually let me choose any schedule that I have available to me in Revit. In fact, if I choose that now, you'll see a list of all of my schedules that are in my project, and I can choose any one of these to bring across into the spreadsheet window. Before I start using this tool too much though, let's kind of show exactly why I might want to do this. And we're going to start with the most simplistic use of Spreadsheet Link, just basic data entry. I want to show you exactly why you might want to use this and roll this out to all users in the firm for more easy data editing. All right, start back with a little story. Back when I first started using Revit, I thought it was amazing, and it is. It's a pretty awesome tool. It was great because I was coming from an AutoCAD background at the time, and I was used to having to do work 3, 4, 5 different times when you make an edit. An example here, I've got an office that I just clicked on, a room that I just clicked on. The number is room 106, the name is office 5, and there's some floor materials, wall materials, and whatever inside of here that I might want to fill out. Perhaps this is for something like a room finish schedule. So I'm going to go to my floor material and put in some code here like carpet 1. Okay, I type that value in, coolest thing ever. In Revit, if I scroll down to my schedules and I go grab the room finish schedule, room number 106, office 5, right there, carpet 1. Fantastic, that was great. And if I go over here to like the north wall finish and I want to put in something like a paint 1, this is great, right? Type in the value, and if I was to go back to that floor plan once again, where was it at? There it is. And I go select this room, hey, look at that. Wall finish north says paint 1. Fantastic. This is cool because now I can do edits of data in any location in Revit. You guys are all probably used to this. Edit Revit in one place and it edits everywhere. Part of the name, revise instantly, right? So then I started to get a little disillusioned with Revit. And this is why. If I take this information here and I go Control C and I arrow down and Control V, right? I want the next office to be exactly the same. Well, now I got a problem because I can't copy paste a row of information in Revit schedule. I can't autofill. I can't just arrow over a cell and go copy, paste, paste, paste. It doesn't work that way. You have to type those things out. And if I go to my next cell and I start typing in PN, it doesn't know that I've already typed PNT-1 before, so I got to type the whole thing out. And again, if I wanted the next row to be the same, can't do it. And that is a little bit frustrating. So then, people say, well, Sean, you noob, why don't you just use schedule keys? Well, that does work. I mean, I could do schedule keys. Yeah, you can see I use different keys in my project and I use this all over the place. But for something like a room finish schedule, that's not always the most convenient, because if I wanted to make just one small change to something, I have to remove the key, and then I lose all the information. I got to type it all back in again, or I have to go to a different schedule, modify the key, come back, and then reassign the key. It's not a smooth workflow all the time. So this is where Spreadsheet Link can come into play. And by the way, I also may have people that I don't really want in my Revit model, or who perhaps don't feel comfortable in Revit and they feel more comfortable in a spreadsheet environment. Well, let me go down here and choose schedules. Since I was just working with the room finish schedule, I'll choose schedules. And let's see, I was using the room finish, so I'm going to go ahead and choose that schedule. I can either double click this or use the arrow, and that will bring it across. In fact, on my other monitor, it happened so quick I didn't have a chance to go grab it. It had a little progress bar. And what it did is it pulled up all of the rooms. In fact, we can see that one room right there that I was just working with. One thing I like to do is just update the sorting just a little bit inside of Spreadsheet Link. It doesn't always pull the exact sorting, since we only offer one method of sorting, and Revit has multiple methods that you could use. We only offer the one, so you have to kind of pick which method you want. But it's now sorted the same way that it would be more or less inside of Revit. So you can see right here, I've got the same offices, same order of the rooms. Now what I want to do is take my paint right here, and I want to copy this across. I'm just going to use Excel-like autofill to just drag that little bottom grip across, and it fills it in all the way across. And maybe I want like an accent wall in here on the west wall or something. I don't know. Do whatever you want. Maybe I also want to take this and I want to autofill this down. I believe if I hold my control key down, it will not auto increment. You know, if normally in Excel, if you were to drag this down, it would automatically increment up. Well, maybe I don't want that. So if you hold down your control key, you can autofill this down and it won't auto increment. Or maybe I want to autofill upwards to all the levels, or all the rooms on level 1 in this case, right? I'm just dragging information around. I can also do things like copy paste, right? Control C, Control V. I can copy these things around and put them wherever it makes the most sense. So if I apply this right now back to Revit, the active worksheet, in this case the room finish schedule, I choose when this goes back into my model. So I'm going to apply the active worksheet back. I did these edits to 15 different rooms live in a spreadsheet-like environment, and it edits all of the rooms that are in my project in the same way. Fantastic. Like, that makes this really easy. I could just as easily have taken this spreadsheet and saved it out to my desktop or some location as an Excel file, given it to somebody, let them manipulate this, and then, you know, when they're ready, I can come back later on, open it back up, and, you know, take whatever their edits were and apply them back to my model. So this kind of, Excel, by the way, is kind of like one of the best kept secrets of building information modeling. You can do a lot with Excel that sometimes building information modeling tools just can't do or aren't designed to do. I can simplify the data, I can run some calculations, I can just basic data entry. It's great. Okay, let's take a look at another example of how to use Spreadsheet Link. So we just did this for a schedule. This could just as easily be a footing schedule or a door schedule or a terminal schedule, you know, lighting fixture schedule, whatever. Any schedule pulled in, you're good to go. Let's do another example with rooms. I like using rooms. They're a simple object. It makes it real easy to kind of get the point across. In fact, let me go to my code plan up here. I think this will be a better view to take a look at this. With these system families here, this is a system family. That's what a room is. Walls are also system families. So are floors, ceilings, railings, ductwork. They're all system families. With a system family, you can't necessarily write your own custom formulas on them. And that sometimes, again, can be a little bit frustrating. So if I take this room and I go over to something like my occupancy, this is a built-in occupancy parameter by Autodesk. This is actually a text field. In fact, if I type this out, it's not going to show up in my room tag because I'm using a different parameter there. But this occupancy right here is just text, and I can't really do a calculation on it. Down below, I had to build in my own parameter because I wanted a number parameter so I could track decimal points. And it does give me, because it's a number parameter, it does give me over here the ability to associate a global parameter. And I could make a global parameter, I could build that in, I could do some interesting things with it, but what I can't have a global parameter do is reference my own area and my own area per person and then fill out a value on myself. I can't do that with a global parameter because a global parameter doesn't reference instance properties of things, and that's kind of frustrating. So I also can't have this be a calculated value in a schedule, because a calculated value in a schedule is a ghost value. It doesn't really exist on that object, in this case a room. It doesn't exist there. It exists only in the schedule view as a dummy value, which means if you delete the schedule, that value and all of its properties, that the parameter and all of its properties goes away. It doesn't really exist. That also means if you were to take an element in your project and try and dump it out to an outside data set, maybe for facilities management or whatever, that information doesn't go along for the ride if it's a calculated value in a schedule. Again, dummy ghost values. What I want is a real value on this element that I can actually have be data. Maybe I want to put a signage component on the outside of the room and have it read the room occupancy. I can do that if it's really a property on the room. Well, for that, I have to be able to fill this out. What I want to do is take area, the actual built-in Revit parameter called area, and I have my own parameter that I made called area per person. You could also call this load factor or whatever you want, any values that you want. In my case, they're both square foot as area parameters. And I want to take the area, divide it by this, and then round up or down. Do whatever the maths are I want to do. In Revit, again, on the object, can't do it. But now let's go back to Spreadsheet Link, because this is where I'm going to use Spreadsheet Link to do an interesting calculation. And we'll do another one later on to make doors and walls talk to each other. So I'm going to scroll down here a little ways to rooms. Grab my rooms, and again on my other monitor it's doing a quick calculation, grabbing all of the room instances here and bringing them into this interface and giving me every available parameter on those room objects that I could potentially put into this Excel export. By the way, Spreadsheet Link gives you way more properties than the out-of-the-box Revit and schedules will give you. You might notice here I've got a bunch of parameters for the bounding box of these rooms. You can actually obtain those values and do something interesting with them. Those of you in the MEP space, you can use these bounding box values to figure out if pipe or ductwork or conduit or whatever is a riser or sloping or not or whatever. There's a lot of things you can do with this to figure out what's going on. There's also the actual coordinates of the element, the placement point of the rooms. This is true for any element that you pick. So if you want to know exact placement points for, say, column components, you can know the placement point for that. There's other things you can grab. Position is another good one to use. There's a lot of values that normally Revit just doesn't show you that you can pull from here and do something with it. What I'm going to do is grab something like level. And maybe I want to grab something like the area of the component and the area per person and that occupancy parameter. You might notice that occupancy is in black and those other values are all grayed out. And that is because level for rooms is not directly editable. I can't edit that in Revit. I have to delete the room and place it someplace else or physically move it detached from the level. You can do that. The area also, you can't directly type a value in. It's figured out by what bounds it. Right? So things in Revit that are not editable are not editable here. We protect you from, editing something that you can't actually touch. It'll actually warn you about that. It does it both here in Spreadsheet Link, and it also does it when you're saving this out to an Excel spreadsheet. So if you were to give this off to a user and you've got a formula-driven value of your own, or something that Revit's auto-calculating that a user shouldn't be touching, it won't let them touch it. Okay. So now that I have this, I want to do some kind of a calculation here for the occupancy. I want to take area and divide it by area per person. So there was a question, by the way, that rolled through a moment ago, and I want to make sure I answer this right away. Since we're talking about instances of objects, it's giving me all of the instances because I'm working with categories. I mentioned a little earlier that you can filter out for just types of objects right down here. So if you didn't want every instance and all you wanted was the type definition, you can choose types. It'll change your selections over here a little bit, but then you can work with types that exist inside of Revit. Wall types, door types, you name it, foundation types, whatever. So you can change that right down here, lower left-hand corner. Categories is effectively instances. All right. Back to what I was talking about here, calculation for occupancy. Spreadsheet Link is effectively just like Excel in what it can do, right? So if I put equals 1 + 1, I'm going to expect it to come back with the value that's calculated, in this case 2, and I can copy this around all over the place as well, and that'll be great, right? Fantastic. I got 1 plus 1, and I can autofill this. Trick is, I do not want to have to manually drag this down for every time I do a calculation for every instance. If I use this on this project, maybe I know I've got 157 rows of data. Actually, it's 154 rows of data. But I don't want to have to autofill that or have a user drag that down every time. So we've built in this cool little feature here where I can check a box in front of occupancy in the calculation column, and what that does is autofills this for you. It'll autofill it down to the very last instance of all rooms, okay? I also want to make sure that I'm not just doing simple maths like 1 plus 1 because that's boring. I want to take the area and divide it by area per person. So let's take and do that. Let's go equals this cell divided by this cell, just like I would do inside of Revit natively, okay? I do that, but the problem is I've got units of measure at play. Now, square footage is pretty easy. I could just do a right trim and trim off the last 3 values there, which would be space, SF, and that'd be okay. But what if I was dealing with feet and inches? I was using a linear property, and I've got, you know, something, something, apostrophe, space, dash, space, something, something, maybe a fraction, and then the quote mark, right? That becomes much more tricky to trim away. And so instead of you needing to go through and trim away all the different units using different types of calculations for that, we have here at the bottom of the Spreadsheet Link settings window the ability to hide the unit symbol. Now I want you to watch when I check that box what happens right over here. When I check this, first of all, it's going to tell me it's going to get rid of my formula, and that's fine. It's going to reset the sheet. But what it will do is it takes the SF off of all of these, giving me the raw number value, and it puts it up at the top so I know what unit of measure it was in the first place. This works for any unit of measure. If you're doing CFM, if you're doing GPM, or fixture units, or whatever you're doing, pull this stuff out into Excel, run your calculations. You can strip the units away, you can know what they are, and then run your own maths on something and bring it back in. So now I can write whatever I want. Equals this divided by this. All right, go. And it runs that calculation all the way down for every instance, referencing its proper cell references. So in this case, I'm in row 109. It automatically autofilled that, updated the cell references. I got 109D, 109E, and it's doing all the work. That's fantastic, right? Okay, great. The problem, though, is that I'm getting a lot of these hashtag values or number sign values out here, and that's because some of these cells don't have data. In this case, it's because these rooms maybe are not occupiable or are not specified with an occupancy in this case, an area per person. So it doesn't know what to do with that. And Excel is going to throw up all over the place. It doesn't like not doing the maths. It wants to do something. So I have to tell it how to handle this. And also maybe I want to round up or down. So what I'm going to do is a little bit of a modification here. I'm going to put a little formula. And if you were saving this out to Excel, it would give you some heads up display because that's what Excel does. Since I'm in Spreadsheet Link directly, I just have to know what the formula is. And unfortunately, I do today because I write this particular formula a lot. In this case, I'm going to do if error, and then I'm going to give it something to do, like round up to the nearest whole person, so 0 decimal places. And if there is an error, put nothing, okay? When I do that, it now does the round up function where it's supposed to. It rounds up to the nearest whole person, 0 decimal places. And down here, when it can't do the maths, the if error takes over and says, okay, I tried to do this math, but I got a value back that I didn't understand. And so what I'm going to do is put nothing there instead. And so I've run this down for all of these. And I could now, if I really wanted to, apply the active worksheet right back to my project, and it would then fill out the different areas with their proper occupancies or leave them blank if there wasn't an occupancy. So simple kind of thing that I want to do in my mind. I do these by hand all the time. Now I can have Excel do it for me with any calculations you want. Even if Revit natively doesn't support that, I can do this in spreadsheets and have it do all the work. I think it's great. You probably don't want to have your users know how to write out these types of formulas. I certainly wouldn't want to have my users do that. I don't think you would either, because it's not really efficient to have everybody know every possible conceivable formula control. Once you work it out, let everybody use it. And so inside of Spreadsheet Link, you have the ability to save your settings. It'll know exactly what category, or if you've chosen multiple categories, which categories you've pulled out. It'll know which fields you've chosen, if you've calculated it or not, whether you've hidden unit symbols, and what formulas you've typed in. When you save these settings to a file, it'll just have this .sl settings file available. I'm not going to do this right now, but you can kind of get a bit more advanced with this, and you can do what's called an advanced save. We do have some webinars that have been previously recorded that tell you how to do this. I'm going to load some settings that show you this, but the advanced save here actually allows you the ability to pre-open an Excel workbook before you even pull the Revit category information into the spreadsheet. And that's super useful if you've already got some formatted data in Excel and you wanted to just read information from Revit. You can do that. You don't need to use Dynamo to do these kinds of things. You can do it directly in Spreadsheet Link. I have users who've been using Spreadsheet Link for this exact workflow for years and years and never had to make an update, never had to rewrite a piece of code to make this work. Users can just open it, run it, as long as their template's set up with the right properties, they're good to go. So you can specify this, and you can even run it silently using a tool called Spreadsheet Link Express. Up on the, let me close this out for a minute here. Up on the ribbon, you saw Spreadsheet Link from the project suite. There's also an SL Express button. That's the Spreadsheet Link Express. What this will do is open up and run Spreadsheet Link settings without ever showing the full Spreadsheet Link interface. It just does the work you told it to do. So you can roll these settings out and say, hey, if you want to run occupancies, just do this thing and run these settings, and then it'll do it. And then users can get those updates in a matter of seconds, sometimes a minute, but it doesn't take a lot of time to let that tool do the work. In fact, let me load some settings that do pretty much the exact same thing I just set up here. I'm going to load these from an outside file. Go back here and pull my Spreadsheet Link settings. You can see I use Spreadsheet Link for a lot of different things here. One of them is going to be for my room calculations, those very calculations I just ran right here. You might notice it pulled up same rooms tab here. In fact, it already has a rooms tab, but it's empty, and it's got a bunch of other tabs that don't look like they ever came from Revit. These are just random tabs that were built in Excel. Well, not so random, they were designed. But this worksheet here that I'm opening up, it actually already contains a rooms tab, and so it wants to know if I want to replace that. And when I'm doing this, you might notice that rooms exists. It's got those exact same 4 parameters. Occupancy is calculated, hide unit symbols checked. I'm going to replace this here real quick. It has another tab for my level name, so it knows how to associate my levels properly inside of here. But this runs a very similar calculation, though a little bit more complicated. Instead of being just if error and round up, it's actually rounding down. And if it's less than 1 person, like it would be here, it puts at least 1 person in that space. But it does all that work, and I can just apply this worksheet right back to my project. This was opened up from scratch. It did the calculation in a matter of seconds, and then I'm able to update 96 rooms very quickly with all of their proper occupancies. Before, these values were all blank, and now it's filled all of them out. In my case, at the same time, I'm able to do other types of calculations. Since I know what level these are on, and I know what my occupancies are on those levels now, I can ask it questions like, hey, how many water closets do I need on a certain level for the men's room and the women's room? How many urinals? How many lavs? How many whatever, right? It knows how to do those things because I've pre-built that into my Excel spreadsheet, so I'm not doing any of those calculations by hand. We have actually a full presentation, like 30 or 45-minute presentation that talks about how to build exactly this workflow. So I'm not going to go into super detail now. I want to show you one more example with Spreadsheet Link of something that you can do, where you can take one element and make it reference some other element in the model and do something with that information. Once again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to load some settings while I'm talking here, so that it can load up on the fly, and I'll just kind of show you what was set up. So I have a fire rating example here where I'm taking my door parameters out here. All my doors have an instance fire rating parameter on them, and I want to pull the wall's fire rating. If it's placed in a fire rated wall, I want my door to read that and do something with that information. So I'm going to go ahead and load this up. Now this is happening on my other monitor. I'm going to pull this across. This is grabbing all of my walls. It's going to then grab all of my doors, and it's going to make my doors have a formula for that fire rating that says, look for your host element ID, look over at the walls for what that element ID is, and then if you find a fire rating over there, use it to do a thing. And so it's doing that right now. You can see some of my walls. This is actually basically a walls type list, but it's grabbing the walls and their type parameters, and then all of my doors. It shows me here the host ID for my doors. If I look at the doors themselves, you can see fire rating is actually a calculated value. I wrote a formula in Excel that said index all of the walls, match up that host ID, and if you find that host ID, pull its fire rating across. And if for some reason there's an error where you can't find the host ID, just put nothing, because maybe it's a door that's like a roof hatch and it's actually associated to a roof, not a wall. Well, then don't freak out on me. Don't just yell at me. Just put nothing there. So if I scroll down here, you can see all these doors now, they've found their proper walls, and I'm not doing anything magical with the data. I'm just copying the value directly across, but it's going to fill out all these doors' fire ratings here for me. And if I apply the active worksheet right back to my project, 14 of my doors in my project were updated with a new fire rating. I probably should have shown you this first, but none of these doors had any fire ratings in that instance parameter. And right now, if I click on, say, this door right here, my instance parameter fire rating is 1 hour. It fills this property out. It's not using a global parameter because my global parameter process can't reference the wall and read its fire rating. It's just a value that's a calculation that I put in. But this way I was actually able to take an element, have it read something else. Sometimes I have things read a level and read a value off of that level. Sometimes I look at an XYZ position of an object and compare that to levels XYZ positions and then do a thing with that, like set an object's level association for scheduling purposes. That's a big thing in MEP and structural. If you wanted to guarantee something is going to schedule to a certain level, you can do something with that. So there's a lot of stuff you can do with Spreadsheet Link to really save you a lot of time. Everything from simple data entry all the way through very complex calculations and workflows that can save hours and hours of time. So with that, I'm going to jump back over to my PowerPoint here for a minute and just talk about a couple of quick conclusions that I've come up with about the use of Spreadsheet Link. Spreadsheet Link does allow faster editing of schedule information. We just mentioned that. It allows users who really don't feel comfortable in Revit to participate still in your project assembly and your project data manipulation by you giving them an Excel file, saving it out for them to work with. This can generate, as I mentioned a moment ago as well, powerful and super stable workflows that can be developed here by using save settings and advanced save settings. Those different workflows, again, they can help you out for years and years if you set this up in a sustainable way. So maybe you don't already have Spreadsheet Link. I understand that some people don't, and you want to know how to get it or perhaps how to get the latest version of Spreadsheet Link. Well, if you go up to ctcsoftware.com, that's our website. On ctcsoftware.com, on the main page, you'll find BIM Project Suite. Or if you were to go to Products here at the top, you can also go to BIM Project Suite from there. When you go to the BIM Project Suite, there's the ability here to try BIM Project Suite free for 14 days. So if you haven't purchased it yet and you want to get your hands on it and just kind of try it out, go for it. Download it, try it out for 14 days. And also, certainly, if you wanted to try to buy it, fantastic. If you're in the US, call up ATG. They're fantastic. If you're in Canada, call up SolidCAD. And if you're any place else in the world, get a hold of us directly. Write to us. You can contact us up here. Email our sales team, whatever. We'd be more than happy to talk with you about how you can get your hands on a fully licensed version of Spreadsheet Link.